drug lord was known to have hidden piles of money and drugs at his various homes around the world.
The last week with crews punching holes in walls, in the floor, in the yard, looking for Escobar's hidden spoils.
Beneath the farmlands and jungles of Colombia, the ground still keeps Pablo Escobar's secrets. Rusting barrels stuffed with dollars, crates of gold guarded by silence, and sometimes, graves no one was meant to disturb.
In this case, Miami-Dade police, when they searched this home here behind me, they found a hidden room with buckets filled with cash.
For decades, families have struck fortune and fear with a single shovel, unearthing not just money, but the violence Escobar buried with it. Investigators estimate billions remain underground, yet every discovery comes with a price. Because in Colombia, digging too deep into the past doesn't just reveal treasure, it awakens ghosts.
I can break some news to you today. They actually did find something. Actually, they found two things, but what those things are and where they found them right now is a secret.
Join us as we uncover the chilling truth of Escobar's lost billions and why farmers, treasure hunters, and even his own bloodline risk everything to find them. The origins of the buried fortune. In the 1970s, Colombia's underworld was already alive with smugglers and small-time criminals, but among them was a young man who thought bigger than anyone else. His name was Pablo Emilio Escobar Gaviria. Born to a farmer and a schoolteacher, Pablo started with petty hustles, selling fake diplomas, reselling stolen tombstones, even dealing in hot cars. But by the mid-1970s, he had discovered a far more lucrative trade: cocaine. By the 1980s, the cartel's empire stretched from jungle labs in Colombia to nightclubs in Miami and safe houses in Los Angeles. At its peak, the Medellin cartel was pulling in $420 million every single week. Pablo Escobar's personal fortune was estimated at over $30 billion. It was so much money that Forbes once listed him as the 7th richest man in the world. But here was the problem. He had too much cash. There wasn't enough space in banks to hold it, and Pablo couldn't trust all of Colombia's institutions. His lieutenants tried stashing the cash in warehouses, but the piles grew so high that rats chewed through them. His own brother later admitted they wrote off about 10% of the cartel's profits every year. Several billion dollars were destroyed by mold, eaten by rodents, or simply got lost in the chaos of moving so much paper money. It was also recorded that he held so much cash that while his family was on the run between 1992 and 93, Pablo reportedly burned $2 million to keep his daughter warm. Pablo needed a storage solution for his overflowing cash, and so came one of the strangest chapters in criminal history. He ordered that barrels and crates stuffed with US dollars be buried across Colombia. The locations included farmers' fields, jungle hideouts, mountain strongholds, and just anywhere secret enough to keep the fortune safe. His most trusted men drew maps, hid the coordinates leading there, and memorized locations. But there was a catch. The Medellin cartel was locked in a war, not just with the Colombian state and US DEA agents, but with rival cartels and paramilitary death squads. Many of the men who knew the burial sites were eliminated long before they could share the secrets, which meant Pablo's money began to vanish into the soil itself. By the late 1980s, his power was absolute. He bribed politicians, threatened judges, and waged open war against anyone who stood in his way. At one point, he even offered to pay off Colombia's entire $10 billion national debt in exchange for immunity from extradition to the United States. But time was running out. In 1991, due to pressure, Pablo agreed to surrender to authorities, but only on his terms. He built his own prison, La Catedral, complete with a nightclub, sauna, waterfall, and private soccer field. It also had telephones, computers, and fax machines. From inside, he still controlled his empire, giving orders and keeping his fortune hidden. After his daring escape, the manhunt that followed immediately was relentless. U.S. intelligence agencies, Colombian police, and rival cartels hunted him day and night. On the 2nd of December, 1993, a day after his 44th birthday, Pablo was tracked to a safe house in Medellin. He tried to flee across the rooftops but was fatally shot. Some claim he took his own life, as he always said he preferred a grave in Colombia to a jail in the United States. Either way, the king of cocaine was gone. But what about the money? After his passing, authorities seized his several mansions, cars, planes, and properties. Rival cartels stripped what they could find. His wife, Victoria, and their 2 children fled Colombia under new identities, later insisting they inherited nothing. Pablo's son has said publicly that the family lived modestly after his death, claiming most of the fortune was stolen or seized. But even with seizures and raids, vast amounts of cash never surfaced. The question has haunted Colombia ever since. Where did Pablo's buried billions go? Investigators estimate that over $10 billion of Pablo Escobar's treasure remains hidden beneath Colombian soil, not in bank accounts or in vaults, but in rusting barrels, rotting crates, and forgotten pits across farms, jungles, and mountains. And here is where the legend begins to meet reality, because the earth did not keep Escobar's secret forever. His stashes have started popping up in the most unlikely places. Farmers' shocking discoveries. In recent years, farmers across Colombia, working the same fields their families had tilled for generations, suddenly found their shovels striking more than rock or clay. What they uncovered looked like something out of legend: bundles of US dollars wrapped in plastic, barrels sealed tight beneath the soil, and sometimes even crates packed to the brim. At first glance, it seemed as though fortune had finally chosen them. But as the earth gave back Escobar's buried wealth, it also revealed how fragile and how cursed that fortune truly was. One of the most talked about cases began with a man named José Mariana Cartolos, a 65-year-old farmer whose family had lived on their land for over 2 centuries. Life was modest, but steady. In 2010, Cartolos received a government grant of just $3,000 to start a palm oil plantation. The money was meant to irrigate his fields and secure a better future. Armed with little more than determination, he began digging trenches. That's when his shovel hit something unusual, hard, hollow, and unlike the soil he had known all his life. Curious, he dug deeper. Soon he uncovered the rim of a blue plastic container, then another, and another. When he pried one open, the sight nearly stopped his heart. Inside were bundles of US dollars, packed tight and preserved in plastic. Not hundreds, not thousands, but stacks upon stacks, filling the barrel from top to bottom. Reports later claimed the stash totaled a jaw-dropping $600 million. The news exploded. Could it be that one humble farmer had stumbled upon the missing fortune of Pablo Escobar? For years, Colombians had whispered about buried barrels in jungle vaults. Now, here was proof. The story spread fast. Newspapers, radio shows, and even international headlines carried the shocking news. But reality, as always in Escobar's shadow, was murkier. According to official reports, Cartolos did not keep a single dollar. The discovery was said to have been handed over to authorities, who promised the money would go to social programs. People joked the stash would finally serve the public in true Escobar fashion. Yet rumors spread. Some said the amount was exaggerated. Others claimed the whole story was a fabrication. Eventually, Colombian police declared the Cartelos story a hoax. But by then, the tale had taken on a life of its own. Farmers across the countryside began digging their lands, convinced they too might strike gold. Journalists called it a new gold rush. Most, however, found nothing but dirt. Still, the legend refused to die, for good reason. Buried stashes were real, and some were being found not by random farmers, but by Pablo Escobar's own blood. In 2020, Nicolas Escobar, Pablo's nephew, made his own discovery in Medellin. Unlike Cartolos, Nicolas wasn't just a villager. He had been part of Escobar's criminal group and knew the hiding places firsthand. Living in one of his uncle's former properties in the Las Palmas neighborhood, Nicolas claimed he was guided by a vision. One night, he said, something told him exactly where to look. He broke through the walls of the house. Behind layers of plaster and brick, he struck plastic. Inside the bag were bundles of cash worth around $18 million. Alongside it lay a gold pen, a camera, rolls of undeveloped film, a typewriter used for cartel communiques, and even old satellite phones. The find shocked Colombia. For decades, locals had insisted Escobar's homes still held secrets. Now the rumors were confirmed, but there was a bitter twist. The money, hidden for over 30 years, was worthless. Rot and moisture had eaten away at the bills until they crumbled at the touch. Millions of dollars, once powerful enough to buy politicians and bribe judges, were reduced to scraps of paper. The nephew's discovery only fueled speculation. If millions could still be pulled from behind a wall, what else lay buried under fields, homes, and roads? How many barrels remained untouched? How many crates still rotted in the ground? And more chillingly, what else was buried with them? For farmers and villagers across Colombia, every plow of the soil carried that possibility. Some struck money, others unearthed weapons. A few uncovered yellowing cartel documents, maps, or communication gear. Each discovery was like opening a time capsule from Escobar's war, a war that took the lives of thousands, shook governments, and turned Colombia into a battlefield. But not every surprise was harmless, because sometimes digging in Pablo's shadow meant unearthing something far more dangerous than money. The dangerous hunt for narco treasure. If Pablo Escobar was the master of hiding wealth, then the decades after his death have been marked by one thing: an equally dangerous game of finding it. From the swamps of Colombia to luxury mansions in Miami, treasure hunters, lawmen, and even men claiming to be Pablo's bloodline have all chased the promise of hidden millions. But searching for Escobar's fortune has never been safe. His cartel often protected stashes with booby traps, hidden explosives, and landmines, reminders that even in death, Escobar's reach was lethal. Dozens of seekers have risked everything for the chance at easy millions. Some succeeded in finding small fortunes, but many more found nothing but danger or ended up behind bars for trespassing on confiscated cartel land. Despite the risks, the legend acts like a magnet. Adventurers and thrill seekers still trek into Colombia's jungles and mountains, carrying little more than shovels, metal detectors, and blind faith. The idea that one could become a millionaire overnight, simply by unearthing the right patch of ground, has proven irresistible. The obsession hasn't been limited to Colombia. In the United States, Pablo Escobar's name continues to spark hunts for hidden loot. One of the most famous cases unfolded in Miami in 2016, when a new owner purchased a mansion once belonging to the drug lord. After tearing down walls and scouring the property with metal detectors, workers uncovered two safes. One mysteriously disappeared before its contents could be examined. The other was pried open but contained little of value, hardly the legendary millions people imagined. For Colombian authorities and the U.S. Drug Enforcement Administration, the search for Escobar's millions has been both a duty and a race against time. While treasure hunters dig illegally, law enforcement occasionally makes official discoveries. In November 1989, before Pablo himself lost his life, authorities in Medellin struck the first of many hidden veins, uncovering $5 million in cash stuffed into underground vaults, sealed tightly enough to survive years of damp Colombian soil. For investigators, it was a breakthrough, tangible evidence that Pablo, always paranoid about banks and betrayals, had indeed buried his wealth across the country. Yet the find was only a fraction of what he was believed to have hidden, a mere drop compared to the billions he raked in each year from cocaine shipments flowing north. A few months later, the ground gave up more secrets. $25 million in rotting banknotes buried alongside 150 kilograms of gold. A treasure so extraordinary, it could have financed a small nation. The legend only grew darker in 2009, 2 decades after Pablo's death, when workers at Hacienda Nápoles, his grand estate turned public park, stumbled upon $10 million hidden in the ground. Even after the estate had been confiscated and transformed into a symbol of Colombia's resilience, Pablo Escobar's shadow lingered in the earth, daring the curious to dig deeper. Colombian authorities have admitted publicly that most of Pablo's fortune remains unaccounted for, and every time one stash is seized, new whispers emerge about another, hidden in the hills, rivers, or beneath abandoned cartel farms. To this day, official searches continue, often supported by new technology. Ground-penetrating radar, advanced imaging, and even drones have been deployed in the hunt. The Discovery Channel series, Finding Escobar's Millions, brought 2 former DEA agents, Chris Feistel and Jerry Salame, back to Colombia with government approval. These were men who had spent their careers chasing narcos. Now they were scouring clandestine airstrips, jungle labs, and hostile farms, hoping to reclaim the fortune for the Colombian people. The series documented just how perilous the search remains. Many rural communities still hold deep loyalties to Escobar's memory, seeing him as a Robin Hood figure who built schools and housing. Outsiders snooping for treasure often encounter suspicion, hostility, or worse. And with modern cartels still active in the same regions, the line between past and present danger is razor thin. Adding to the bizarre saga are claims from abroad. In London, a man named Philip Whitcomb, also known as Roberto Sendoya Escobar, has long insisted he is Pablo Escobar's secret son. Philip says his adoptive father knew Pablo and that the drug lord himself passed him coded messages pointing toward hidden treasure in Colombia. He published a book and appeared on British television, retelling his story of coded maps and secret inheritances. But for all the drama, nothing has ever come of it. He has never uncovered treasure, and Colombian authorities have never confirmed his supposed bloodline. To them, it is just another chapter in the long, strange mythology of Escobar's fortune, and so the hunt continues, half reality and half legend. Small stashes are unearthed from time to time, but the vast majority of Escobar's billions remain missing. What is certain is that the search itself has claimed lives, fortunes, and reputations. For some, Escobar's treasure is a dream of salvation. For others, it is a death sentence waiting underground. But the bigger question remains: if law enforcement keeps finding millions and treasure hunters refuse to give up, Just how much is still out there, and who, if anyone, will ever claim it? However, the strangest discoveries of Pablo Escobar's hidden fortunes would not be just money. The bizarre contents of certain stashes. When the fortune hunters arrived in Colombia, they came searching for treasure. Barrels of cash, gold bars, or jewels whispered about in cartel legends. But often, what the earth gave back was something far darker. Alongside bundles of rotted dollar bills and rusted rifles, diggers unearthed bones and shallow graves, some no more than a few feet deep, which held the remains of Escobar's victims. Fingers bound with wire were seen, as well as skulls shattered by close-range bullets. There were bodies dumped without names, abandoned beside the very fortunes that had cost them their lives. In some pits, the bones lay tangled with weapons and money, a grotesque reminder that in Escobar's world, cash and death were inseparable. Farmers digging for irrigation sometimes struck not barrels but coffins improvised from dirt. The grounds of Medellin, Antioquia, and the Magdalena River Basin became a kind of archive, not of wealth, but of terror. These were not simply treasure caches. They were narco time capsules, snapshots of an empire that built itself on both greed and blood. In the early 1990s, when Pablo's properties were first raided by investigators, they were left stunned. Inside the vaults, they found crates of AK-47 rifles, grenades, and thousands of rounds of ammunition. In other locations, they found rocket launchers and body armor stored beside stacks of US dollars. Each vault was like a war chest, designed to secure Escobar's fortune while ensuring he was armed for siege at a moment's notice. In waterproof containers, investigators uncovered ledgers and documents far more dangerous than firearms. These documents detailed shipment schedules, coded financial transactions, and extensive lists of bribes to politicians, police, and judges. In precise handwriting, these records mapped the reach of the Medellin cartel, stretching from Colombia to Miami and beyond into Europe. For prosecutors, these ledgers were invaluable, offering a rare blueprint of how Pablo's empire operated. What was more terrifying was that the vaults were not the only thing Pablo Escobar took his time to craft. Former associates and locals described soundproof, windowless rooms fitted with hooks and drainage systems, hinting at torture or interrogation chambers. Though such sites were not documented formally, the accounts matched Escobar's reputation for ruthless intimidation. In Medellin, Pablo built an entire neighborhood, Barrio Escobar, providing 1,000 homes for families who had lived in a garbage dump. To the poor, this made him a Robin Hood, the man who gave them dignity. But the neighborhood was also a fortress, a stronghold where Escobar could hide drugs, guns, and money. The residents, bound by gratitude and fear, became his eyes and ears, reporting police movements, protecting stash houses, and serving as a human shield for the drug lord who ruled them. Escobar's reign was legendary for its violence. He is believed to have ordered the deaths of more than 4,000 people, from rival cartel members to policemen, politicians, and even journalists. For him, no one was untouchable. In 1984, he had Colombia's Minister of Justice, Rodrigo Lara Bonilla, gunned down for daring to oppose him. The same goes for the liberal leader, Luis Carlos Galán, who kicked Pablo Escobar out of politics. He was brutally assassinated at Pablo's orders. In 1989, he went even further, planting a bomb aboard Avianca Flight 203 in an attempt to kill Luis Carlos's successor, Cesar Gaviria Trujillo, a presidential candidate, but he missed the plane and survived. The plane exploded mid-air, killing all 110 passengers aboard. For Pablo, violence was not a side effect of business. It was business itself. And when treasure hunters struck those shallow graves, they were colliding with the full brutality of a man who believed fear was more powerful than money. But not all discoveries were so straightforward. Some finds bordered on the surreal, like fragments of a nightmare Pablo had buried with his fortune. Gold bars and rare jewels were unearthed in unexpected places, sealed with ledgers that listed not only cartel shipments, but also the names of corrupt officials on his payroll. These were men in uniform, men in office, whose loyalty had been bought in hard currency. Such records were more dangerous than money itself, proof of how deeply Pablo Escobar had infiltrated the Colombian state. To understand the reach of that empire, you only had to look at the places where Escobar buried both wealth and fear. Even today, in Medellin's Comuna 13, Pablo's ghost lingers. Murals of his face, tours of his haunts, and souvenirs of the Narco years turn tragedy into spectacle. Tourists walk through streets that were once rivers of blood, drawn by the myth of the Robin Hood, who both gave and took away. The hidden graves and bizarre caches feed that myth, painting Pablo as more than a criminal, but as a figure who blurred the line between legend and nightmare. For the authorities, every bizarre find was a double-edged sword. On one hand, unearthing cash or gold meant weakening the remnants of the Medellin cartel. On the other hand, stumbling upon bones or cult altars was a reminder of just how much Escobar had poisoned Colombian soil. When searchers later uncovered human remains alongside the caches at Hacienda Nápoles, the message was clear. His fortune was cursed. The strange, chilling finds, bones, ledgers, and jewels shattered any illusion of Pablo as a folk hero. He was no Robin Hood, but a man who built power through terror, who bombed airplanes, who ordered assassinations in broad daylight, who hid not just money, but evidence of cruelty in the earth. Each discovery peeled back the layers of myth, showing an empire that was stranger and darker than even Hollywood dared portray. But beyond the bones, gold, and blood-soaked ledgers, the buried cash itself carried a different kind of danger, one that revived laundering, bribery, and entire towns suddenly flooded with dirty money. The narco economy of buried cash. For most people, stumbling across a bundle of cash buried in a field might feel like a miracle. But in Colombia, especially in regions once controlled by Pablo Escobar and the Medellin cartel, such discoveries often created new problems instead of solving old ones. Pablo's billions, hidden away in plastic barrels, oil drums, and hastily dug pits, didn't just rot underground. They seeped into the economy in strange and disruptive ways. After his death in 1993, rumors of hidden stashes spread through Medellin, Cali, and countless rural towns. Farmers, construction crews, and even children sometimes unearthed old bills. Even when a few stacks were salvageable, they couldn't be spent openly. Carrying thousands of US dollars into a Colombian shop raised suspicion. Banks often refused the notes, especially if they were damaged. That left locals with one option: launder the money through informal markets. The black market became the lifeline of Escobar's ghost economy. People who found stashes would trade damaged notes at a fraction of their value, exchanging them for goods, services, or pesos. Informal money changers, known locally as cambistas, sometimes offered 10 or 20 cents on the dollar, depending on the condition of the bills. In return, they cleaned, re-ironed, and moved the cash discreetly, often funneling it into contraband markets. In some towns, stories circulated of entire shops quietly accepting old US dollars, no questions asked. Police reports from the late 1990s and early thousands note sudden spikes in US currency circulation in villages that had no obvious source of tourism or foreign income. Authorities suspected locals were spending recovered narco cash. This sudden flood of money could change the rhythm of a whole town. A farmer who had been barely surviving might suddenly buy a truck, renovate his house, or purchase livestock in bulk. In some cases, whole communities seemed to leap from poverty overnight, triggering gossip, envy, and police attention. One infamous example was a small community near Antioquia, where locals whispered that the mountain had given back Escobar's silver. Within months, families were buying motorcycles and televisions, things far beyond their previous means. Investigators suspected someone had unearthed a stash and spread the dollars quietly through barter and bribes. The sudden prosperity didn't last, though. Police swept in, confiscated goods, and the cash trail evaporated. These weren't isolated cases. Colombian newspapers through the 1990s carried scattered reports of peasants, construction workers, and even children finding wads of money. Some tried to hide it, while others handed it in, but many more quietly pushed it into circulation, fueling a shadow economy. One DEA report in 2009 described how narco cash bled back into the system like groundwater seeping through cracks. It wasn't visible at first glance, but it warped local economies all the same. The laundering often went hand in hand with bribery. If someone unearthed a stash worth thousands, they had to keep police, rival treasure hunters, and even cartel remnants from noticing. Bribes became the cost of doing business. A stack of bills could buy silence, loyalty, or protection. In places where Escobar's influence had been strongest, old habits lingered. People still remembered the phrase Pablo had used in his prime, plata o plomo, which means silver or lead. Take the bribe or take the bullet. Even in death, Pablo's money carried the same weight. Colombian authorities struggled to contain this underground economy. They knew Pablo's fortune hadn't vanished into thin air. Former associates claimed billions were buried, but without precise maps, every rumor risked sparking a local gold rush. In Medellin, police raided safe houses long abandoned by the cartel, and sometimes found cash hidden behind walls, beneath tiles, or inside furniture. But for every official seizure, there were whispers of 10 more discoveries that never reached the headlines. Meanwhile, Colombians continued to live with the legacy of this narco economy. For some, it was a strange blessing, a chance encounter with forgotten wealth. For others, it was a curse. Families who discovered stashes sometimes faced extortion from criminal groups demanding a share. Others lived in fear of being accused of laundering narco money, even when their finds were accidental. Most of Pablo Escobar's fortune remains missing and is likely unrecoverable, destroyed by time and weather. Yet every few years, a discovery makes headlines. A stash in a wall, a barrel unearthed by a plow, or a rumor whispered in Medellin's hillside barrios. Each story pulls Colombians back into Pablo's orbit, a reminder that his empire, though shattered, still casts a long shadow. Escobar may be dead, but his money still haunts Colombia, buried under fields and jungles, waiting for the next shovel to bring it back to light. Thanks for watching. Now check out the videos popping up on screen for more unbelievable stories.